Okay, well, again, thanks so much. I just want to start out by presenting this whole concept. Imagine if there was a single molecule that would change the face of healthcare. And if that molecule existed and we could commercialize it, would you want to be a part of it? So that's what I'm going to present over the next 20 minutes, is how we've been able to capture a bioactive gas with a half-life of less than 1 second into a safe and effective oral dose form of a bioactive gas. So I'm the founder and CEO of Bryan Therapeutics, a Texas-based C Corp. I've been in academic medicine for the past 25 years, and really my research program has been designed around trying to develop nitric oxide-based therapies. I've published over 100 peer-reviewed scientific papers, have several dozen issued patents. In fact, the royalties for my patents are responsible for about 30% of the annual revenue to the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston. So out of 81 portfolio companies, we're responsible for about 30% of their annual revenue. And in fact, the product revenue from the companies that license my product is to date over $1 billion. So the technology I'm presenting today has really been de-risked, it's been proven safe and effective. And so now we have a new opportunity to advance that into clinical care. And the nitric oxide has been really remarkable in terms of its importance in clinical medicine. A Nobel Prize was awarded for its discovery in 1998 by Bob Furchgott, Lou Ignarro, and Fred Murad. In fact, the front page of the New York Times the day the Nobel Prize was awarded last week, 25 years ago, was that it's one of the most important discoveries in the history of cardiovascular medicine. So these three gentlemen shared in the Nobel Prize for the discovery that is actually produced in the human body, and I've been the first and only person to develop an oral dose form of a bioactive gas that can recapitulate nitric oxide production in the human body. So what I've learned in academia is that chronic disease is caused by two things and two things only. The body is missing something that it needs, or it's exposed to something that it doesn't need. And then the underlying consequence of that is that you get ischemia or hypoxia, which means there's reduced blood flow to the affected organ, whether it's the heart, the brain, or the sex organs, which leads to an increase in inflammation, oxidative stress, and immune dysfunction. And those are the hallmarks of every single chronic disease. Again, it doesn't matter if it's diabetes, autoimmune disease, cardiovascular disease, or Alzheimer's. If you can address these four fundamental issues around chronic disease, then you can correct all that. And nitric oxide is this molecule that improves blood flow, reduces inflammation, inhibits the immune dysfunction, and inhibits oxidative stress in that particular organ. It's a remarkable molecule because it's very simple. It's one nitrogen, one oxygen, and it's a gas. So when it's produced in the body, it's gone in less than a second. So it's produced, it activates a number of signaling cascades, and it signals. So it's how cells in the body communicate with one another. Its primary signaling is in vasodilation. So when it's produced in the lining of the blood vessel, it opens up the blood vessels, and now you can actually perfuse downstream tissue. But it also, as I'll show you, it modulates the vascular inflammation, which is the earliest stage in cardiovascular disease. The clinical studies reveal that the older we get, the less natural production of this molecule occurs in the body. And it's this age-related decline in nitric oxide production that's responsible for age-related disease. So our whole thought process was, if we can understand why the body loses its ability to make nitric oxide and prevent this age-related decline, can we prevent age-related disease? And the short answer is yes. So the data tell us we lose about 10 to 12% of our vascular function per decade. So by the time we're 40 years old, we have about 50% of the nitric oxide we had when we were younger. And this is the age people feel the effects of aging. In fact, today, 50% of the men over the age of 40 self-report erectile dysfunction, which is a symptom of insufficient nitric oxide production. But it's more than that. If you can't make nitric oxide, how do you present clinically? This is just a short list of the clinical symptoms. So when you develop safe and effective nitric oxide-based therapies, you really get to the root cause of a lot of these clinical conditions, to which there's really no effective therapy. Even hypertension, which is a relatively simple disease, 50% of the people that are given antihypertensive medications don't respond with better blood pressure, because no one has failed to address the underlying physiological basis for hypertension, which is nitric oxide deficiency. We've realized that there are certain things that disrupt nitric oxide production. We discovered the first pathway to be discovered was an enzyme in the blood vessels. We published 20 years ago that the oral microbiome is a prominent source of nitric oxide. If you use mouthwash every day or use fluorinated toothpaste, it disrupts the microbiome, shuts down nitric oxide production. I was on the doctor's show a couple of years ago where we revealed that you lose the protective benefits of exercise if you use mouthwash. Antacids. Major pharmacotherapy disrupts nitric oxide production. And then it's just really some simple diet and lifestyle modifications. The problem is the American population is non-compliant. Nobody wants to change their diet. Nobody wants to change their lifestyle. Everybody wants to take a pill. So when people fail to comply, we have safe and effective technology that does it for you. We recently acquired one of my other companies. So we have a consumer product division. So now we have revenue in our drug company. So we make an orally disintegrating tablet that generates nitric oxide gas. Beets have been a hero vegetable now for the past 10 or 12 years. We make a fermented beet powder for pre-workout energy. And then we've created a topical nitric oxide, and I'll show you how we're developing that into a topical drug for diabetic ulcers and non-healing wounds. So what makes us different? There are hundreds of nitric oxide products out there. Big pharmaceutical companies have been trying to develop nitric oxide drugs for 40 years. In fact, I've consulted with most of those companies. But what we do is completely different. We have the first and only solid dose form of a bioactive gas. If your body can't make nitric oxide, we do it for you. And then we fix the reason your body can't make it. We recouple the nitric oxide synthase in the lining of the blood vessels. We restore the oral microbiome. But the beauty of our drug discovery program is it's not pharmacology. We haven't developed any synthetic compounds that inhibit biochemical reactions. What we do is called restorative physiology. Understand the extent of disease that you can actually fix it. So we're restoring the production of a fundamental molecule that recapitulates physiology. And that's the basis of medicine. And medicine is really just applied physiology. We've been moderately successful with these consumer products with really no advertising because most of our focus is on our drug discovery. But you can see here the past several months we got a 100% growth every 30 days. With little or no advertising. So now we're ramping up, and we expect a $7 to $8 million exit rate by the end of the year. So here's our drug discovery pipeline. We had a drug in phase 3 clinical trials for COVID as an early therapeutic because we realized the people in really May of 2020, the people that are getting sick and dying from COVID were the people who couldn't make nitric oxide. The elderly, African Americans with a previous heart attack, diabetes. So we developed a nitric oxide drug that we got through phase 3 clinical trials in African Americans with COVID. Obviously, the COVID disease changed, so people weren't getting sick and going to the hospital, so we suspended the drug trial. But the beauty of it was we treated over 600 really sick, highly susceptible patients, and there was no safety signal. So now the FDA has allowed us to go straight into phase 3 clinical trials for our other drug formulations. So as most of you know, phase 1 and phase 2 are typically 5 to 7 years, anywhere from $40 to $80 million. So we fast-tracked that in 2 years, and I spent less than $2 million on the COVID trial. And this is the underlying basis for everything we know about vascular disease. So the cardiovascular disease, which remains the #1 killer of men and women worldwide, occur when you start to get plaque deposition, stenosis of the coronaries. This plaque becomes unstable, the plaque ruptures, and that's a heart attack and stroke. But it's known now, and we discovered this about 20 years ago, that if your blood vessels can make sufficient nitric oxide, it prevents this plaque deposition. It prevents plaque instability, it prevents plaque rupture. But in fact, the functional loss of nitric oxide precedes these structural changes by many years, decades in fact. So you have to be able to produce nitric oxide to be able to prevent and even reverse cardiovascular disease. And here are the numbers, and these are quite shocking. So I'll just let you read this, but the staggering statistics which should make headlines is that the number of people dying from cardiovascular disease is the equivalent of 4 jumbo jets crashing and killing everyone on board every hour, every day of the year. And that's a staggering statistic. And to me, that's unacceptable. We know what causes cardiovascular disease, we know how to diagnose it, and we know how to treat it, cure it, and prevent it. So it's not the lack of information, it's the integration of the science and the translation of the science into clinical practice. And here we can actually look inside a blood vessel. So this is a blood vessel from an American diet, a typical person eating an American diet. You can see the blood vessel is constricted. The blood vessels become like Velcro. Immune cells stick, platelets aggregate, there's a little bit of blood flow getting through here, but these cells transmigrate through the endothelium. This is a heightened state of vascular inflammation. Even if we give that same inflammatory diet, but we administer our nitric oxide drug, you can see here the blood vessels are more dilated, the immune cells home along the endothelium, but they don't stick. You completely suppress the inflammatory response to a poor diet. So this doesn't give you an excuse to go eat a poor diet. What it does is explain to you the importance of having sufficient nitric oxide so that you don't develop cardiovascular disease. So we've met with the FDA for our COVID drug study, and now we've moved into ischemic heart disease. To us, that's the low-hanging fruit, because all we have to do is 100 patients show that we can prolong exercise-induced angina with no tolerance. And we've been doing this for 15 years. So this heart disease trial will cost $4 million. It's about an $80 to $90 million a year market, so it's not trivial. And that's basically the cornerstone drug of isosorbide mononitrate and isosorbide dinitrate. Now we're moving into Alzheimer's because we understand the etiology of Alzheimer's disease. And so this is a picture of a SPECT scan, and a SPECT scan tells us how well perfused the brain in. How much blood supply is getting to that part of the brain? And what you'd like to see is a nicely contoured brain here, which means every part of the brain is perfused, getting oxygen and nutrients. In an Alzheimer's brain, not only is it atrophied, but there's holes in the brain, and these holes are reflective of ischemia, or lack of blood flow. So the etiology of Alzheimer's disease is the lack of cerebral blood flow and insulin resistance. Here are the numbers. It's staggering. It's growing. There's no safe and effective treatment for Alzheimer's. In fact, the amyloid plaque hypothesis is flawed, and that's why all drugs have failed, because everybody's going after the beta amyloid plaque and the tau tangles. Those are consequences of disease. They're not the cause of disease. And it's called diabetes type 3. We've shown in 2009, we published the first paper that nitric oxide is critical for insulin signaling and glucose uptake. So in Alzheimer's patients, they can't make nitric oxide, they develop insulin resistance, diabetes type 3, they lose the regulation of blood flow, you get misfolded proteins. So the underlying basis of the metabolic and the cerebral blood flow problems with Alzheimer's can be addressed by our nitric oxide drug. So here's the solution. We overcome the metabolic disease, we perfuse the brain, we reduce the inflammation, oxidative stress, and immune dysfunction. Now let me tell you a story about this guy. This is my dad. He had a car accident in 1984. And so he's been paralyzed. He just turned 75, so he's been in a wheelchair for more than half his life. So I've dealt with decubitus ulcers for most of my adult life and treating non-healing wounds. So this is when it became personal to me. So this is when he was released from the hospital, had a hemorrhoidectomy surgery in 2013. And a surgeon told him to go home, sit on a heating pad 30 minutes twice a day to facilitate healing. And when you take a diabetic paraplegic patient and put them on a heating pad, they cook. Obviously, they can't feel that. So this was a very serious injury. They figured he probably wouldn't survive it. If he did survive, it'd take 9, 10, 12 months to heal. So this is right after the skin graft on the burn. So I developed a topical nitric oxide gauze to try to restore blood flow to the skin graft, try to kill the infection. And within 12 weeks, we completely healed that very serious wound on a diabetic paraplegic older man. So that really revealed to me that we had a way that we could really overcome some serious clinical conditions. But when they graft over his right ischium, he developed an ischial ulcer, had skin breakdown. And this was a non-healing wound. This was a 4-year-old wound at the time. I could put a tennis ball in here. He was septic. He was had osteomyelitis, osteonecrosis. So again, I just went back to the basics, did a wet to dry dressing, put a nitric oxide releasing gauze in there, and within 1 year, we completely healed the wound. So this is 6 years later. He has no wound. His ass still looks like a crime scene, but we've had no tissue breakdown and no wounds occur since then. And it's antimicrobial. So this is a smear of Pseudomonas, which is a nasty infection in most non-healing wounds. The clear there, if you remember back from the discovery of penicillin, that's the killing of the bacteria. So the nitric oxide is antimicrobial. In fact, we haven't found a bug that we haven't been able to kill at this dose. Wound care, there's been no innovations in wound care for 50 years. We treat wounds today the same way we did 50 years ago. And to me, that's unacceptable because we know how to do this. We know how to kill the infection in the wound. We know how to get blood flow to the wound, cause tissue granulation, initiate an immune response, and the body heals itself. So this is about a $50 billion a year was spent on wound care. Hundreds of thousands of patients die every year from bed sores, from becoming septic. And so this is some of our other clinical data here. A 3-year-old non-healing diabetic foot ulcer we healed in 30 days. Second-degree burn, apply the topical nitric oxide. 21 days later, complete healing with no scar formation. We've been able to reduce or reproduce the results in my dad and another paraplegic diabetic patient that was treated at Yale Medical Center in New Haven. A 3-year-old non-healing wound, apply the serum 2 to 3 times a day in and on the wound, and 195 days get complete closure. And this guy had been to the best wound care centers and wound care docs around the world. So where are we today? We've met some key milestones. To date, I've self-funded this project, and I've raised about $1.7 million from friends and family that got us through the phase 1, established safety in the COVID drug trial. Patheon, we have an agreement with them. They're a drug manufacturer, one of the world's largest drug manufacturers. We've got 2-year stability on our drug and placebo. And now we've got pre-IND meetings with the FDA. So the whole point here is that we know exactly what to do. We've gotten the regulatory guidance from the FDA. Now we just need the funds to put the drug in clinical trials and let it perform. So today we're doing a $20 million capital raise. And we've got this. I have the license for my patents from the University of Texas. There are milestone payments that are due upon entry of these drugs into clinical trials. We're going to continue we've got the registration batch, but we have to do we've got the clinical trial material. We've got to do a registration batch, which is about $1.1 million, and the use of funds. The beauty of everything we do, through the royalties of my patents, the money that we raise never goes to pay salaries. Nobody takes a salary. Every dollar we raise goes through the development. So we're very lean, we're a very nimble machine, and the whole point of this is to get these drugs through the clinical trials approved so we can save countless of lives every year that are poorly managed. Our strategic plan, early on I thought we could de-risk this, sell it off to Big Pharma, and enjoy the rest of our life. But to me, I think this is too important. We're in it for the long haul. We want to raise the money and get one drug approved. The $20 million will get our ischemic heart drug approved and on the market, and then allow us to advance the Alzheimer's drug, the topical drug, into clinical trials. We have revenue from our consumer packaged goods division. And so $20 million will really get us to the finish line. And our goal is to be the global leader, the world's largest pharmaceutical company that develops bioactive gases as a mainline therapy, and utilizing this concept of restorative physiology. So today we're in phase 2B, 3A clinical trials, phase 2 clinical trials for the topical. Obviously these are huge addressable multi-billion-dollar markets. We've really got a stellar team here. I've spent 25 years in academia. Susan Schaefer's been with me for 15 years, my business partner and COO. Got Bob Arnott, who's the chief medical correspondent for NBC News, as our chief medical officer. We just brought on David Perlmutter to lead our Alzheimer's drug study, a world-renowned neurologist and Alzheimer's expert. John Somberg is our clinical trial PI. John's conducted 45 clinical trials through the FDA and gotten 41 drugs approved. So he knows what he's doing. He knows the ins and outs of the FDA. B.K. Sahel is our international advisor. Joe Hippler is our chief strategy officer. And I like this quote because what we've revealed here truly are fundamental truths. And this old 400-year-old quote is, these go through 3 stages. First, it's ridiculed. Secondly, it's violently opposed. And third, it's accepted as being self-evident. And I've lived through these. I was obviously ridiculed early on in my academic career. We've been violently opposed because what we're doing is really disruptive to Big Pharma. But these are fundamental truths, and it's self-evident. So with that, I got 45 seconds left. But, we're going to change the world. If you want to hop on and tag along with us, please reach out to me. We're very excited about where we are. It's my first kind of attempt to go out and raise money from sophisticated investors. But I thank you very much for your attention and look forward to hearing from you.